Hare Krishna, everyone. Thank you for coming. And of course, today we're honouring Srila Prabhupada on the occasion of his disappearance from this world. And generally, I'd like to, just a little bit of an introduction, I usually like to read from Tamal Krishna Maharaj's diary. He was there at the time, and he gives a good account of the last moments of Prabhupada's life with us. And so at 7:25, Prabhupada opened his eyes, which were very clear, more so than in many months. His mouth opened, his tongue moved, and then he became still. Kaviraj took Prabhupada's pulse and held a cotton swab to his nostril, detecting no movement of air. Our beloved Srila Prabhupada had departed. Surrounded by his loving disciples who were chanting the holy name of Krishna, lying very peaceful in his bed in Vrindavan Dham, the holy land of Krishna's birth, his head directed toward the deities of Krishna Balaram, surrounded by photos of all the deities and his Guru Maharaj, decorated with chandana and a big tulsi leaf on his forehead, and holding tulsi in his right hand, he departed and returned to the lotus feet of Krishna from whence he came. Bon Maharaj returned and advised that we take Prabhupada's body on parikrama of Vrindavan to the 7 major temples. We sat Prabhupada up and crossed his legs, which had remained open, and we tied it closed with, we placed Prabhupada in his palanquin and carried him into the temple with the blowing of conch shells and beating of madangas and kartels, first taking him before each deity and then circumambulating the temple 3 times. We brought him again before the altar of his lords Krishna and Balaram. We circumambulated his transcendental body 4 times with kirtan, afterwards placing his whole palanquin on the Vyasasana. Prabhupada's expression was sublime, just as when he had previously sat on the Vyasasana. His eyes were closed, there was a slight smile on his face, and we all expected and prayed that at any moment he would lift his hand and return to us. The day was a Gora Chaturtha Tirtha, and the light half of the month of Kartik. The time was 7:25 p.m. 5 minutes after the most auspicious time of that day, Amrita Yoga began. Now, as advised by Prabhupada's godbrothers, the devotees took Prabhupada on parikram around Vrindavan, and this was announced to all the residents of Vrindavan. At 6:30 a.m. the Goswamis of the 7 temples arrived to escort the divine form of Srila Prabhupada to their respective deities. Prabhupada had his hat and chadar on, and he sat in his palanquin. He would not circumambulate lying down. Like a strong lion he sat up, and when the residents of Vrindavan saw him, they were amazed. He was covered with flowers offered the previous night by his disciples. Taking him into the courtyard to the accompaniment of kirtan, we circumambulated his body 4 times and began our procession with grand kirtan. The Brijbasis, happy to see his perfection, chanted Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada. Everyone knew him as Vrindavan's most famous son, and they loved him. As we approached each temple, the head pujari came out, the kirtan rose to a crescendo, devotees chanting the names of each deity, Jai Madan Mohan Jiva, Jai Radha Damodar, Jai Radha Raman, glorifying the particular deity and Prabhupada, who represented them so well. We were all merged in an ocean of grief, yet proud to be the disciples of our Guru Maharaj. The parikram lasted 3 hours, ending when we arrived back again at the Krishna Balaram Mandir at 9:30 a.m. We brought Prabhupada's divine body to his samadhi site. Upendra and Bhavananda undressed Prabhupada, leaving only his kopin, and placed him on banana leaves. Ananda Prabhu poured Jamuna water over Prabhupada's transcendental body. I took the conch shell next, this is Tamal Krishna Maharaj, and allowing all the devotees to touch it, poured water over his body many times. We dressed him in new silks and new sacred thread. Narayan Maharaj took a Tulsi Manjari and with Chandana wrote the Samadhi mantra on Prabhupada's chest. Everyone descended 7 to 9 feet into the Samadhi pit, at the bottom which was a pure white marble slab. We performed pujas, Ananda Prabhu chanting the mantras while guiding the movements of my hands. Upendra and Bhavananda lifted Prabhupada's transcendental form and I received Prabhupada's body for the last time. We placed him in a sitting position and offered arti. All the devotees who were standing about, chanting and blowing on conch shells, threw thousands of flowers upon Prabhupada. As Prabhupada had previously instructed me, I saved a few to be taken to Mayapur for another samadhi. We poured salt 9 inches deep around Prabhupada's body, then filled the rest of the samadhi with dirt. We marked where his head was, and after reaching the ground level, we built up an area about 3 feet square, marking the place where his body was seated. We covered the area with fresh cow dung and placed fresh saffron silk on top. For shade, we suspended from 4 bamboo poles another saffron cloth. We placed 2 tulsi plants on each side, and on the raised ground the photo of our beloved Guru Maharaj. Pradyumna offered prasadam and full arti, and we circumambulated 4 times. In complete surrender, we took shelter of Prabhupada's lotus feet. One of Prabhupada's last yearning desires was to go on parikram around Govardhana hill. Because we wanted to fulfill that desire, because we were feeling separation from our beloved Guru Maharaj, we decided to take him to Govardhana. We selected the date of Gopastami, when Krishna comes of age as a cowherd boy, on November 18th. On that morning after Mangalarti, all the devotees took prasadam of puri, halva and sabji in buses and vans. We then set out with Prabhupada present in his Archa Vigraha form and in a large photograph. We placed the deity of Prabhupada in the back seat of his car between Upendra and myself, and the front were Bhavananda, Chudananda and our devotee driver. We went first to Radhakund because Prabhupada had said when he was unable to go, "You bathe on my behalf." Now he bathed personally to our great happiness. Chudananda performed the Abhisheka ceremony. The golden form of Prabhupada was then lowered into the cool water of Radhakund. 3 times he bathed as we looked on his golden body through the water. And the ceremony was being held on the thin strip of land between the 2 kunds. Next, Jayapataka Swami carried Prabhupada upon his head and bathed him 3 times in Shamkund. He was dried and dressed in new silk cloth, placed upon his palanquin and offered full arti, the devotees chanting Jaya Prabhupada. Accompanied by kirtan, we circumambulated those 2 most holy lakes. We boarded our vehicles and proceeded to Govardhana, where we assembled, and a procession proceeded with Prabhupada aboard his palanquin, which had been wonderfully decorated. How beautiful the land of Govardhana is, with its trees and grasses. Prabhupada had ascended to Goloka, and now by his causeless mercy we felt as if we too had been allowed to enter that transcendental realm. As we circumambulated the mountain, no longer did our hearts burn from separation. We were with Prabhupada again. We were so glad to see him riding again on his palanquin, leading us as always, giving us shelter. It was a cool day, and our walking created dust, the whole atmosphere being filled with dust. We could only remember Krishna coming home from tending the cows. As we proceeded, our talks were all of Prabhupada. We remembered his pastimes and recounted his unlimited glories. We especially remembered the past 2 weeks, which had been so sweet. We took pleasure understanding how the past months were given by Prabhupada for deepening our love and for no other purpose. He simply lay on his bed week after week with no other purpose than to attract us. How mercifully he acted toward us. As we wound round the hill, the path was uneven. We reflected that Srila Prabhupada could have made this journey only in his present eternal form. Though we walked for 3 hours, the 8 miles passed easily, on the way back we divided into 2 groups, recounting the glorious activities of Prabhupada in the early days of New York. We proceeded back to Vrindavan, back to home with Prabhupada, weary as we rode in our car. It'd been a wonderful outing because Prabhupada had been present. Prabhupada lives with those who live to fulfill his desires. We take shelter beneath the lotus feet of our beloved Guru Maharaj, whom we eternally serve. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. it's a wonderful account given by Tamal Krishna Maharaj from his diary. So I won't take up more time. I know there's a lot of speakers who want to speak, but I remember we had there was one of the little girls who said when she said that Krishna, even through what did she say, through all the difficulty, he kept going. So that was Prabhupada. And last week we were having a conversation, reading from Chaitanya Charitamrita, about Prabhupada, that sometimes the name, the title Prabhupada, some of his godbrothers complained, but he was so humble himself, he said, I never use that name, that is being conferred upon me by my disciples. So Prabhupada was always very humble and always promoting the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna. I remember one time in Melbourne, I can't remember the year, but in a night lecture, someone asked Prabhupada, how do you know that your path is the top path? And Prabhupada said, because Krishna is the top. Because Krishna is the top, therefore this is the top. So Prabhupada was always glorifying Krishna. So this was his position, always humble. And many have said that, he was different from a lot of other gurus who very much promoted themselves. He very much promoted Krishna. So today we get the opportunity of offering our respect and our obeisances and our worship to His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami, Srila Prabhupada ki.